PFT PM Posse, why can't the Cowboys defense get a holding call? Only 16 total holding calls this season, especially Micah Parsons, who hasn't gotten a holding call in 38 quarters since October. He's often got arms wrapped around his neck or his waist. This is one of the things that the officials are doing now. And this is what Myles Garrett got fined for pointing out. They look the other way on holding. They look the other way on the left tackle and the right tackle leaving early. This is all about helping offenses. They believe that they need to help offenses gain yards and score points. Holding does not get called every time holding happens. Every game, it seems like, you'll see a play or two where someone is being held and there's no flag. And part of it's just incompetence, but I think part of it is they just kind of look the other way on it. The problem is it creates inconsistency. I think back to that Bengals-Jaguars game where the Jaguars had the 43-yard pass play wiped out that would have set them up on the doorstep of the end zone for a touchdown to win the game against the Bengals, and all of a sudden the holding penalty comes out and we see what the holding was, and it's like, we see that all the time, not called. That's the problem. So it's about helping helping offenses fend off great defenses. Sims made this point last year. The defensive linemen are so good, the NFL needs to do something to balance it out. Otherwise, the game's going to be 10-7, and nobody wants that. Next question. PFT PM Posse, why do dogs like our wives/females better, even if we/men do most of the feeding, playing with them, letting them out, etc.? Even though Dirk, our dog, comes to me for most of the things he needs and wants, he wants to chill with someone on the couch. It's always my wife. Well, I mean, there's an alpha in every pack. And my wife was the one member of the household that was a little bit leery about getting a dog. She was on the fence about it. My son was pushing it. I was pushing it. We bring the dog home, and the dog locked onto her immediately. Now, she takes care of the dog, feeds the dog, takes the dog out, takes the dog to the vet. I'm the one the dog comes to when we're eating and it's time to mooch. The dog knows that she's more likely to get it from me than she is from my wife, but the rest of the time, it's all about mommy. And at night, if they're in the room together and I walk in, she comes after me. Now, she doesn't try to bite me, but she barks, and I don't know whether it's she wants the attention or whether she's just protecting the alpha. But in this household, the alpha, as far as Macy is concerned, is my wife. PFT PM Posse, what are the legitimate ways to make up the difference for Kalin Barnes of the Jets for losing his roster spot / practice squad spot, and what keeps teams from abusing those ways of circumventing the salary cap, funneling money through other companies they own via marketing deals or TB12? This one's fairly simple. Kalin Barnes is the guy who ultimately got the short straw after Aaron Rodgers moved to the 53-man roster. And Rodgers said himself on Tuesday that he didn't want to go to the 53-man roster. The Jets wanted him to keep practicing, and the Jets got benefit from it because he ran the scout team last Friday, spirited practice, helped get the defense ready for Sunday's game against the Commanders. So it was Nick Bawden, the fullback, who was bounced from the 53-man roster when Rodgers was elevated. Bawden passed through waivers, signed with the practice squad, and they have every intent of bringing him up for every game. So he's going to make all of his money. Kalin Barnes is the guy who got bumped off the practice squad. Now, he got paid for last week because it happened on Friday. So he's going to miss 2 game checks, 2 paychecks as a member of the practice squad. Well, I'm told they fully intend to sign him to the 90-man roster in the offseason. They can give him that money as a signing bonus. They can work it into his pay when he comes back to the team. So there are ways to make sure that he is made whole by this circumstance that resulted in him not being part of the team. So I don't think it's a violation of the rules. I think it's just a matter of making it right with a guy who got bounced off of the practice squad as part of this domino effect of Aaron Rodgers returning to the active roster. Curtis Schumann, or Schumann. Any clue when the Bills play next week? Trying to make plans. When will we know for sure? We'll know after Week 17. We'll know on Monday. That's when they look at all the games. There's going to be 2 that move to Saturday. We know that now. ABC, ESPN doubleheader on Saturday. They'll pick 2 of the games moving to Saturday. Then there'll be a cluster of games at 1, cluster of games at 4:25, and then the Sunday night game to wrap the season. And they try is the key word, to have games that have overlapping playoff implications played at the same time. That doesn't always work, but they try to do that. So It all depends upon whether and to what extent that game in week 18 is going to mean anything. Is it going to be for the AFC East Championship? If the Dolphins lose to the Ravens and the Bills win this weekend, it is for the AFC East Championship. Does that become a Saturday game? Does it become a Sunday night game? It's all to be determined. We'll know by, I believe, Monday, Tuesday at the absolute latest, but I think it's Monday. I think it's like Sunday night because there's no Monday night game. At some point on Sunday night, I think they'll announce the schedule for week 18 because by the Sunday night game between the Packers and the Vikings, they'll know all of the various tentacles, and that's when it'll happen. Manuel Villa. It seems like there's an effort by the NFL to not flex games this season. Am I way off on that? I think what happened was, and I don't know this, but I think what happened was by expanding flexing from Sunday night to Thursday night and Monday night, and in their desire to protect the national windows for CBS and Fox, where you get that 4:25 p.m. Eastern game that has a massive audience, somewhere between 24 and 25 million on average for either network. I think it just makes it harder to pick and choose which games are going to go. And there's different rules that apply. And at some point I knew the rules, but at the end of the day, the NFL does what it wants to do when it comes to where the games are going to be. It's their call. And the thing you have to keep in mind with flexing, it's not about guaranteeing a great game in every primetime window. It's just about having break glass in event of emergency in the event you get a game that's going to be bad. It's not about making a good game better. It's about making a bad game good. And we've seen it one time this year because Chiefs-Patriots, given how poorly the Patriots were playing, and that was still a surprise because you're giving up a Mahomes game. But the game that went in its place, Seahawks-Eagles, more relevant for both teams, more competitive, exciting game. But I think we're going to see flexing sparingly, especially because it doesn't matter who's playing. We still watch. Ratings are the highest they've been since 2015. We still watch. You don't need to have stars all the time. It's nice to have the guys that will maybe bring in some extra. The Cowboys who always bring in some extra. $31.5 million for Dolphins hosting the Cowboys on Sunday. But I think we're going to see less of them. In their zeal to expand the protection against a bad game, I think we're going to see fewer occasions of those games being swapped out. But when there is a truly bad game, a nightmare scenario, it's going to go. And remember, there are time limits that apply. A game that looks okay 1 week, by the time the game comes, it may be a disaster. Or a game that looks like it's going to be a disaster, by the time it comes, it's not that bad. There was a large chunk of the season where Packers at Vikings on New Year's Eve looked like a potential disaster for NBC. Both teams are still alive. And, it's a border battle, and it's, a classic rivalry, and it'll do a good number on Sunday night. No matter what game was going to be there, it's going to do a good number on Sunday night, as long as it's not a complete disaster game with a team that nobody cares about because they're completely eliminated, not playing for anything. All right, what else? Good question from Will Jackson. Do you think the Ravens will play their backups against the Steelers in Week 18 if they win this week, or do they play their starters to try to keep the Steelers out? I think there's another reason to play your starters. Remember 4 years ago when the Ravens locked up the 1 seed with 1 week to play, and Mark Ingram tweaked a calf muscle in that game? They rested the starters the final week of the season, and they had the bye. So you don't play your starters final week of the season. They're off for the wild card weekend. It's 3 weeks between meaningful games. Your opponent in the divisional round is a team that probably has had to play hard all the way through the end of the regular season to get to the playoffs, and then had to play a playoff game and win it. That team comes into your building in the divisional round. And I compare it to like 2 boxers. One comes in with a good sweat boom, and the other one is ice cold, flat-footed. All it takes is 1 early uppercut, and we got a problem. And I think it adds to the pressure and the stress of the team that had the special season that resulted in the 1 seed. You can see it all evaporate in 3 hours. And 7-0 becomes 14-0, becomes 17-0, becomes 24-3. And before you know it, it's over. So I think that the Ravens should keep playing their starters. Look what the Patriots always did. No matter how great they were, no matter what they had locked up, they kept playing their starters. It's a football game. We're going to play football. And if somebody gets injured, it can happen anytime, any place, anywhere. All right. What else? Jason, no, let me try that again. Justin Pursuit. In your career covering the NFL, have you ever had a reaction from a player because of something you said about a player or team similar to what happened with Lamar Jackson? Well, who can forget? I think it was 2016. Aaron Rodgers was saying some things about the Packers, about not having energy on the sidelines, about not having accountability. Players had to be fearful they were going to lose their jobs. And my point was, even though he wasn't saying it, it was pointing to coaching, that the deficiencies he was noticing and articulating, the things that he said were missing, were the responsibility of the coaching staff. There's no energy on the sidelines. Who's responsible for ensuring there's appropriate energy on the sidelines? There's no fear that if you don't do your job, you're not going to have a job. Where does that come from? This is the team that had the coach who would yell, "What the hell's going on out here?" and grab, 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 grab. You want a coach that's going to instill that fear that if you don't do your job, you're not going to have a job. So I made that point, and Aaron Rodgers didn't like it, and that led to the classic clip that I still want to have at my tombstone, solar-powered, perpetual loop of Aaron Rodgers saying, "Don't waste your time reading crap like that," in reference to me, specifically called me out at that time. And I think Bruce Arians called me out a couple of years ago when he finally retired from the Buccaneers, and my argument was that he was kind of nudged away as part of the return of Tom Brady. They didn't really like that. So it happens. It happens. And it's, as I was telling somebody yesterday, I practiced law for 19 years, as I've mentioned a few times in the past, but I'm setting up my comment here. My worst day in this job is better than 99.9% of my best days in the other job. I mean, I'm covering sports. I'm covering the NFL. I've loved the NFL for 50 years. I'd be spending time following it, too much time following it, even if I didn't have this job. So is it going to be fun and games every day? Are there going to be days where, I've stepped into a problem and it comes back to haunt me? That's going to happen. I'll just deal with it because it's still a damn good job, and I'm grateful to have it. I'm grateful for all of you because you helped me have it, because if you didn't listen to what I was saying or writing or paying attention to any of our opinions or whatever, it wouldn't matter. And it's the thing. The fact that what we said last week became such a big deal, it's one of the costs of actually having a platform that people pay attention to. If you're irrelevant, you're not going to get that kind of blowback. Nobody's going to care. It's just a voice screaming into the void. Donald Koch, do you think Brian Daboll is the right coach for the Giants? I think that he needs more time. They need work on their offensive and defensive lines. He needs a little more time to get to where he's going to be. And I'm glad they turned it around just enough to presumably stem this trend of 2 years and out, dating back to Ben McAdoo, 2 years out. Pat Shurmur, 2 years out. Joe Judge, 2 years out. For a while there, it looked like Daboll was going to get the same thing. I think they did enough to keep that from happening, and we'll see where it goes. Macy, my dog, very well trained and very good with the keyboard. Pops, what was your best Christmas present this year? Best present ever, and why was it me? Best moment of Christmas for you. Best gift this year. I've wanted a Ferrari for a while now, and I got a Ferrari. Unfortunately, it was a Lego Ferrari, but my nephew got me a Lego Ferrari, and that was a nice little treat. I'll have to put it together at some point when the season's over, but I still want to get a real one of these days. Best Christmas present ever. And I got set up by my parents, as kids often do, where you think you didn't get that thing you wanted, kind of like Ralphie with the Red Ryder BB gun, where all the presents are open and you didn't get that thing you wanted. No, wait, there's some. They did the same thing. Oh, there's something over there. What's over there? I won electric football in 1975. 74 or 75, and didn't think I was getting it because all the presents were open. There was no sign of it. It was hidden somewhere. And once you see it, you know what it is. And that's what it was. And that was pretty good until I turned the damn thing on, right? All that time and effort, you get the players lined up right, and you turn it on, and they start spinning around in circles. Also, first home video game system, 79, I think. I was 14. The Atari 2600 system, but I had the Sears version of it. See, Sears bought it and put their own. They put their own logo on it. It was still the Atari system, but it was the Sears equivalent of the Atari system. That was pretty good too. All right. Manuel Villa, any big player trades you can see happen this year, a player that is due a big contract that the current team doesn't want to or can't pay. Haven't really thought any of that through yet. I think Devontae Adams is probably going to be traded. We now have Russell Wilson in play for a potential trade. You may have some guys that demand trades who you think they're happy in their current teams until you find out they're not. Guys that want contracts, with CD Lamb, who I think will be entering his 5th year, his option year coming up. He may get to the point where he's frustrated and wants more. That's part of the fun, though, of the offseason. You find out the guys who've kind of been holding it in, frustrated, upset, and they wait. And then all of a sudden, boom, this player that you thought was happy where he is, he wants to go somewhere else. We saw it with Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams a couple of years ago. We'll see what happens. There isn't anyone right now other than Adams that I'm looking at saying, wow, and maybe I'm just not thinking of it because I hadn't given it any prior thought. There may be some out there I'm not thinking of. Adams is named number 1, and after that, we'll just see how it plays out in the offseason. John Prowell, what has Kenny Pickett shown so far to give the Steelers justification to have him as the starter for another year? I don't know. I don't know. There's nothing he does that you look at and say, wow, not many guys in the world can do that. And the question is, would they be willing to admit their mistake after only 2 years? Maybe for Russell Wilson, if he's available. But this may be part of what they need to work out in an effort to fix the offense. And I think part of it, too, is when you hire a new offensive coordinator after the season, you want his input on personnel. Are you bringing a system? And I think this is part of the interview process. Are they going to want somebody who's going to get the most out of Kenny Pickett? Or are they going to hire somebody and say, all right, now that you're here, what are we going to do by way of an offense? And I think as a more practical matter, they'll be looking at the ideas that the coordinator candidate has for the offense before he's even hired, but there'll be an understanding. Are we sticking with the guy we have? Are we going in a different direction? That's all to be determined. James M., why hasn't Trevor Lawrence taken the step forward this year most people expected? Well, he's been banged up a lot. The offensive line has not been good, and the defense hasn't been as good as it was last year. They can't run the ball, and it just hasn't happened. And the truly great quarterbacks transcend all of that, you would think. But this year's just been a disappointment overall for the Jaguars. At a time when it looked like they were going to be pretty good, they've really fallen down with 4 straight losses, and they might miss the playoffs. They're in that 3-way tie in the AFC South, 8-7 with the Texans and the Colts. Tyler Hergert, when is the next round of NFL expansion coming? At one point this year, I said, we can't think about expansion because there aren't enough quarterbacks to go around. And then we see the games this year and the backups, and the people are still watching, and the games are still exciting, and it's still very compelling. They're going to want to expand the inventory of games. They want more games they can move around to different countries. They want more games they can put in prime time. They just want more. Everybody wants more. And I think they want more teams at some point, even with the quarterback issues. I think expansion to 34 is on the table, and then 36, and then 38, and ultimately 40, but not in my lifetime. I think in my lifetime, I hate to think of it in morbid terms like that, maybe 36 by the time I sign off for good. Who knows? Dr. J, 144, Woody Johnson said Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas are coming back. Is Hackett a lock to come back? His performance doesn't warrant it. How would that play in the locker room if they bring Hackett back just because Rodgers wants him? I think Hackett's coming back. I think Hackett's got the most job security of anybody in the NFL. He and Rodgers will work together and take care of the offense. Saleh takes care of the defense, and the Jets become next year what they were going to be this year if Rodgers stays healthy. That's the idea. But they need to make the offensive line better. Is Hackett suited to be a head coach? No. Did he do a good job this year once Rodgers was removed from the equation? No. But together with Rodgers, we've seen what he can do. However, and Rodgers has made that point. However, when Hackett was with Rodgers in Green Bay, Matt LaFleur was there too. There was a head coach who was overseeing the offense along with Nathaniel Hackett. It's all Hackett next year, so we'll see. But Hackett's got complete and total job security now that Aaron Rodgers is coming back. It would be a stunner, beyond a stunner, if they would dump Nathaniel Hackett, because Rodgers is very loyal to him, and I can't see Rodgers blaming any of this on Hackett. Rodgers blames what happens this year on him not being there. You take him out of the mix, of course they're going to struggle. And next year with Rodgers, they should be fine, but we'll see. Assassin 16. If quarterback safety is a priority, why not revise intentional grounding? Throw to to the line of scrimmage, regardless of where the quarterback is standing. No receiver needs to be in the area. Caveat could be no defensive holding of receivers on a play if it's grounded, pick up the flag, etc. Look, I think right now they don't enforce intentional grounding strictly to give the quarterbacks a fail-safe to get rid of the ball and avoid a hit. They're trying to keep the quarterbacks healthy. You could argue that intentional grounding should be allowed anytime, any place, anywhere. There aren't many more things you can do to make the game safer for quarterbacks. I've kind of joked in the past that you could use the roughing the punter and kicker rules for quarterbacks, which would revolutionize the game. But that's one way to make it safer for quarterbacks. And letting them ground anywhere, anytime, any place, just throw it straight to the ground if they want to, that would allow them to avoid a situation where they're about to get sacked. But think of how often that would happen. If all you have to do is throw the ball into the ground. I mean, I think you at least have to get it back to the line of scrimmage, whether you're in the pocket or not. But the idea of just spiking it just before you're hit and just before you go down, I don't think that's going to go over. See, that's the problem. As we keep making the game safer for quarterbacks, it makes it harder to get people who just love football for the sake of football and like good defense and want to see the defense rewarded for making good play. If you give the quarterback too easy of a way out, it just kind of takes away from it. All right, I should probably wrap this up. It's been a full hour. I'm scrolling to see if there's anything good here. There are some questions about Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, which we have answered. They were questions that predated the news that Russell Wilson is being benched. Amused to Death has an interesting question. Is there any chance Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie pulled a plug on Nick Sirianni and the coaching staff? I wouldn't rule out anything because there's a standard in Philadelphia that they expect to be met. And when Chip Kelly didn't meet it, he was out. When Doug Peterson didn't meet it, he was out, even though he'd won a Super Bowl. Sirianni got them to a Super Bowl. Right now, there's just kind of a weird thing. Sirianni admitted that his body language isn't ideal, and the offense is dipped without Shane Steichen. The defense is dipped without Jonathan Gannon. I think next year becomes very interesting. If the Eagles don't make it at least to the NFC Championship, I think there's a lot more pressure next year on Nick Sirianni. Not hot seat, but inching in that direction. That Eagles team, and I think the fan base, I know from dealing with members of the fan base, they got that taste of a Super Bowl win, and they want more, and they want another one, and they want it now. And I don't know how much patience they're going to have with any head coach of a team that they think has been put together in a way that it should contend with the best teams in the NFL. All right. Justin Pursuti. Is PFT commenter still my internet son and Barstool Big Cat still my internet nephew after the stunt they pulled on PMT? What they did, and I'm not mad at them. They're just having fun. It's their bit. It's their shtick. They called me after the Ravens beat the 49ers, and they wanted comment on Lamar Jackson calling me Mike Florist. Now, I've confirmed that it's Flores. In the locker room, it was Flores. Regardless, what they did was, once I'd start answering, they hung up on me, and then they'd call back, and they'd say, first they said, Big Cat's phone died. And then they're talking to me again, and while I'm answering questions, they hang up. And that's fine. I don't care. It was 1 a.m. I was working. It's always fun to hear from those guys, and I know they mean it all in good fun. And they're good friends. I'm not upset with them at all.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.